You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in David Pelligrinelli, president at Active Intel, with locations in Texas, Florida, and Oregon. Dave, how are you today?
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Nice job on the pronunciation of the last name. First try. Usually it takes people a couple tries. So that's about 10% of the population does that. So nice job.
Thank you. I was practicing a little bit. I want to lean to say Pellegrini, but Pellegrinelli.
That's right. There's a couple extra letters in there. It was a rough childhood. I had to learn the alphabet really fast.
It is pretty cool, though. So first and foremost, I was kind of perusing your LinkedIn profile today, and I saw UMass Amherst.
That's right.
You're a UMass guy?
Yeah, not a graduate. Went there for some period of time. I think I might even attended a couple classes, but it was a great place to go to school. It's a great campus. And I grew up in New England, so that was kind of a local school for me.
Yeah, I'm a UMass Amherst guy. So where in New England are you from?
I grew up in Connecticut.
What part?
Just outside of Hartford.
Okay.
I lived in East Hartford, Glastonbury for a while. I lived in downstate in Old Saybrook and in Hingham. But Connecticut's a small state, so if you live in it's almost like living in a metro area. The whole state is the size of most big cities. Yeah,
I practiced law in New Haven for a while at the housing authority there. So that's where I first got barred, passed the bar there. So yeah, New Haven, Connecticut, that's awesome.
Connecticut Shoreline is a very underrated part of the country. It's a great spot. I'm sure it's different now. I haven't been back in a long time, but it was a great place to grow up and a good place for business back in the day.
Right. So I want to just kind of jump right in. What you're doing is super interesting. I hope everybody really tunes in, turns it up, because, it's not every day that I get to talk to somebody who's a licensed private investigator. Since 2010. So I just want to jump right in, and I'm really actually curious, like, how you got into that and really like what the process is, because you see it on TV, but you don't really I don't understand what would go into doing something like that.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. And, a private investigator in almost all jurisdictions in the country, it's a licensed activity. You can't just say, I want to be one. It's not anywhere near as detailed of a credential as being an attorney or something else, but it is licensed. And the process of getting the license, most states, it's kind of a catch-22, right? In order to be a licensed investigator, you have to show up with a certain number of years experience as an investigator. Well, how do you do that? And there's a couple pathways to it. Sometimes it's if you work for an agency for a certain number of years, certain number of hours, then you can apply for your own license. Many people get into it from law enforcement. So most law enforcement backgrounds allow you to count that, as long as you're not just a patrol officer, if you do some kind of investigations, detective or whatnot. And that's where many private investigators get their accumulated experience to become licensed. And a lot of them do it because, as you know, in the public sector, law enforcement, fire, everything else, you have a pretty stout retirement pathway where you can put in 20 years as a police officer, you can retire. So if somebody comes into the force at 25, at 45, they're vested, they can retire. Now that becomes a second career. That's not how I got into it. I was actually working, I ran a company that did records research and data research, mostly in the real estate industry, title documents, deeds, mortgages. And what I found out was many of the clients that we delivered these research projects for, the next thing they did was they needed to do an investigation, maybe for a fraud case, maybe for embezzlement, maybe for some type of asset recovery. So since we found many of our clients needed that investigative research, we wanted to be able to provide that. So we found a pathway where, as the security officer for my company and doing that work, that counted towards the hours. So
Okay.
it went through the licensing process. It took many years. You have to take exams and training and all kind of stuff. And that got into it. It's a really good business to be in because it's, kind of close to your world. It's legal adjacent. A lot of the
Right.
clients we work for are attorneys, asset searches for judgments, fraud investigations. The other part of it is, as a licensed investigator, if you look at the statutes in most states, certain activities require the license: surveillance, witness interviews, and agencies generally will specialize in one area or another. For example, we don't do really hardly any surveillance or witness interviews, that kind of thing. Mostly what we do is the forensics on data, records research, asset search. So we stick to the kind of the records and digital side more so than the physical. Like you said, you see on TV an investigator doing surveillance, following somebody around with a camera, seeing what they do to make sure that they're not, lifting up hay bales while they're on work comp, that kind of thing.
So as an investigator, private investigator, I thought maybe what I heard you say is, if you join the police, it's like kind of being on like a different side. Like private investigator work like directly for you, like they'll do
Yep.
like whatever you tell them, but the police, it's like a government job, and so but it's
Yep.
sort of similar duties. Is that what?
Sort of, in the private sector, you're working for clients that you don't have the same. There's pros and cons. A lot of people that are colleagues that came from the public sector law enforcement side, they say, hey, this is very different. You don't have the same access to things like search warrants or background checks and all those things, arrest powers. You don't have that. But on the other hand, you do actually have some additional or less requirements where you can do interviews, you can research things without having to have the requirements of the law that apply to the government when you're doing research. So you have to be very careful as an investigator. There's still rules. There's even things like pretexting. You can't just call up a company and saying, hey, I'm Joe Schmo, I'm a customer, tell me inside information. You have to follow the rules of privacy. You can't do a telephoto lens inside somebody's window to see if they have evidence in their room. You can't
Oh yeah.
do hacking. You can't misrepresent things. A lot of times as an investigator, you get requests from clients to see something on TV. Like you said, well, can you, make some fake evidence to show somebody did something wrong? You still
Wow,
have to.
really? They'd say that to you, huh?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, we get a couple hundred inquiries a day, and I would say 10 or 15%
Really?
are asking to do something which is illegal. Sometimes they don't know.
So you get a couple hundred inquiries a day. So
Right.
tell me, like, what kind of companies you helping? Who's your client?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our practice area is focused mostly on fraud investigation, asset search, and digital forensics. And
Okay.
what those entail, to flesh those out a little more, is fraud investigation typically is there is some asset, some amount of money that's been improperly transferred. It may be a Ponzi scheme. Somebody was contacted online. Hey, send me $10,000 and I'll double it in a week. Turns out it's a big scam, right? There's a method of fraud that
People
came
fall
up
for that, huh? That's crazy.
Oh, you have no idea, Benjamin. I have to tell you, it's heartbreaking to see the number of inquiries we get for people that have lost tens of thousands,
Yeah.
sometimes hundreds of thousands, to so obvious scams. And these are not unsophisticated victims. Many times it's somebody who is an accountant, professional person, executive, even attorneys, that they got an email. And these scammers are very, very clever. They start out innocently enough, and we'll get into how those cases work. But first, we'll talk about what kind of cases. The fraud investigations is some type of fraud. Could be a Ponzi scheme. A lot of times now we're seeing probate fraud, where there's a death in the family and there's an estate that needs to be distributed, and one or more of the heirs is trying to take more than their fair share. They're hiding an asset, draining a bank account, maybe taking a car that was in the garage and selling it off. Probate fraud is a highly increasing fraud. A lot of it is in divorce cases where one of the parties is concealing assets, not showing all their cards on the table. The digital forensics is an area we do that has to do with electronic devices. You have cell phones and computers that are hiding data and extracting hidden records or supposedly deleted records out of that. And then the other types of fraud are corporate embezzlement. A lot of times a CEO or CFO will come to us and say, look, I think there's money missing. The numbers don't add up on our balance sheet.
Wow.
Can you find out what it is? And almost always there's some type of theft. What level it is varies.
How do you look into that? Tell us about all the equipment you have in the background, over
Well,
there, because I know
yeah,
that's the first thing I said when we came.
Yeah, we get that
What do
a
you
lot.
have there? If you can't tell us, don't tell us. But it's pretty elaborate. It looks like.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of stuff, and really, it's just all they're all different computers and monitors. But the reason for these, some of it's analytical things. The offices that do the analytics and the forensics and the deep dives, that's elsewhere. Most of these are monitoring business activity. So we have the investigative business. We talked before about, we also do mediation. We're a certified mediator.
Yeah.
We do cyber insurance. We do other things. Each one of the screens monitors one of the business segments. And I have it that way rather than having different tabs so that I don't get personally distracted trying to jump back and forth.
Okay. So
but to answer your question, for the asset search, it's a ingest of large volumes of data. In your world, you probably are familiar with e-discovery, where you're just ingesting huge volumes of records, PDF files, spreadsheets, databases, emails, and then finding the connections between them. When you're doing asset searching, you're finding the needle in a haystack where this asset went from this class to another, or where the person has a small transaction on their credit card that by itself doesn't mean much, but it connects to something bigger. So it's ingesting large volumes of data, spending hours and using technology to make it efficient, and then having an output of an investigative report that says, here's where the assets are, here's where the money's being stolen from the company, here's where the scammer put your Bitcoin, that kind of thing.
So any type of company would contact you. I know my original question was who are your clients?
Yeah.
Law firms, or who, give us an example of somebody who calls you up. You say you get 200 inquiries a day.
Yeah.
What are some of those businesses that are saying, hey, I think something fishy's going on here?
Yep. The inquiries are about evenly distributed between law firms, private companies, and consumers, about a third each. And it varies from month to month. When it's a law firm, they're usually representing a client that has some need.
Gotcha.
And if it's an asset case, it may be a judgment, right? The law firm or the individual or the company has obtained a judgment in court against a person that says, look, you lost, you owe this person $180,000, $1 million, whatever it is, and now you have to collect. And as you know, just because you have a judgment doesn't mean a check shows up in your mailbox. You have to actually find the asset and garnish them.
So how do you do that? Tell me the process of what you actually, in the weeds, dude, do you have people working for you? When they call you and they're like, okay, we have to recover this asset because that's how we're going to repay it or make the client whole. How does that?
That's right.
Tell me about that.
What'll happen is there are 11 different classes of asset. There's real estate, vehicles, bank accounts, intellectual property, intangible assets, and there's 11 classes, and each one is a separate search process. For example, as you know, real estate records are recorded at the county recorder's office, deeds, liens, mortgages. So one of the staff is going to go do a full deep dive into the deed books, the records books, to find the real estate assets vested in that debtor's name or that judgment name. And then somebody else will search for the vehicle records for the DMV to find out what vehicles are owned or that have been recently owned and maybe recently transferred away, like a fraudulent conveyance. And then somebody else will look for the bank accounts. What are the accounts? What are the balances? Where are they located? And go through all the different asset classes. And then that's turned over to the client, whether it's the attorney representing the creditor, judgment holder, or the actual client. And then we can give some suggestions on what the next move is. Obviously, as you know, there's another step involved. Even if you find a bank account that has a pot of gold in it, you can't just walk into U.S. Bank and say, hey, I have this judgment, I have this account, give me their money. They're not, it doesn't work that way. You have to get rid of garnishment or some other instrument to be able to do that, or file a lien on the house or what have you.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about how someone can get admitted as like an expert witness
Hmm.
for document forensics.
Mhm.
I know that's
Yeah,
kind of
so
shifting gear. We're going to go back, but I want to
yeah, no,
bring that up.
that's actually a good question, because when a case, and this is sometimes before the judgment, where there is a dispute over the records or dispute over the facts of a case, a lot of times it's required to present documents that says, look, this person owns this asset, or this person took this money, or this person violated this contract. And when you have the testimony of the plaintiff, that carries some weight, but a lot of times the court is looking for backup documentation. And you can say, well, here's the deed to the property, here's the contract. If in addition to that, you can have an expert witness testify, yes, this deed was obtained from the official records by a certified title examiner. It's the official record. Here's what it means. And now that expert witness can opine about the records, its source, to make sure the source is accurate,
Right.
and how it connects to the rest of the case. And of course, it's up to the court to decide what that means and what probative value it has. But you have to be first accepted as an expert witness. For example, I'm an expert witness for many things. I wouldn't be an expert witness on brain surgery, right? So the
Right.
court will designate somebody to be an expert for their expertise. And a lot of times that comes from an interview with that person. The court's going to ask questions. The opposing party will, pepper you with questions of
Well,
what
yeah, I
makes
was
you
going
an
to ask that.
expert.
Do they try to? If you're an expert witness, do they
Yeah.
try? Oh, Mr. Pelligrinelli, how much are you getting paid per hour for the? Or
Yeah, they'll ask you
do
that. A
they
lot of
try to
times
just?
you'll have to do a deposition in advance of the case, and they'll try to discredit your evidence and show things. I've had cases where one of our biggest clients, and this is something I can speak to because we've talked about it before. I'm not betraying any confidences. Is the U.S. Department of Justice. I've testified for the DOJ for real estate records for people that have tax liens against them that are trying to get out of the tax lien. And I can remember one of the parties in the deposition trying to say, you're not an expert witness, you don't know what you're talking about, and how much you're getting paid. And that's why it's very important to make sure your testimony is always very rational and fair-minded. You don't want to try to skew it or pick sides, because that opposing party is going to pick up on that. Or even the next case will go back to one of your old cases and say, look, you're always saying what's to the benefit of your paid client. You're never saying anything that's neutral. So you have to, even
Right.
though you're working for your client, you have to, go down the middle of the road and make sure it's accurate. So that way you're taken seriously and you can continue to have valid arguments that the court will accept.
It's amazing. So, like, how did you go down this path? Like, what made
Hmm.
you so interested in this type of work?
And this also gets into why we got into the mediation part. We see, as you do, in society, but a lot of times in the legal side of it, conflicts between people,
Yeah.
disputes between people. And as you know, nobody's ever 100% right, right? In any dispute, even if you're 90% right, that means the other person's 10% right. What we like to see is a resolution of these conflicts. Most conflicts don't even need to exist in the first place, right? They really can be resolved. And by getting to the core of it, dissolving all of the emotions that go into it, all the um, I got to have my day in court, all of the pride and ego that goes into it, most cases, most disputes can be resolved without the drama of a full-blown, drawn-out litigation. And even as an attorney, I'm sure that you can attest to this, and even your listeners or viewers, even as an attorney, you don't want to go to court. You want to try to avoid litigation. A lot of clients, consumers, civilians think, well, the attorney wants to go to court, so it's more billable hours. Most attorneys don't want those billable hours to go to court. You want to stay out of court so you can
Right.
spend your time in a more efficient manner in your office, doing things that are more valuable. And as you know, it's more of a risk to the client too once you go to court.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about like active intel, like why it's
Mm.
in the three different locations?
Yep.
You say it's Addison, Texas. You're in Florida, Oregon. So,
Yep.
like, tell us a little bit about active intel.
No, it's a good question. The company, one of the things that's made us be able to be valuable to clients is to focus on those three practice areas. We don't try to get too wide a field into surveillance or, you know, infidelity investigations. We stick to those three because you can become very good at those. In addition, one of the things that we try to do is make sure that the case is going to be valuable to the client. Of those couple hundred, inquiries a day that we get, most of them, even though we could assist, it's not going to be worth it. If somebody, wired $2,000 to some Ponzi schemer in the Philippines, or bought a $500 gift card for Walmart and send it to a scammer, there's no point in doing an investigation to dig out all that. It's just not going to be worth it for cost of their, we'll counsel them and let them know, look, chalk it up to experience. Don't do it again. Here's some tips. We have some free resources on the website.
Right.
But we try to focus on the ones that we can get the most bang for the buck, get the most benefit with the highest probability of the results the customer wants. And that way we can work on cases that are going to be good for the client. There's plenty of cases to go around, even, for you and your firm, visitor or viewers, you have more cases than you can do. So why not do the ones that will help the clients most?
So do you have examples of like big cases that you want to share with us? I mean, you don't have to use names, obviously, but any sort of like big situations that are beneficial?
Yeah, one of the cases that we really like to use as an example is, it was an asset search case. This particular client was a plaintiff, had won a judgment, and actually was getting a second judgment for additional damages, and wanted to do an asset search, first of all, to see how to get restitution on the first one, but also to see where the defendant stood for the second case. And the defendant swore up and down, I have no assets, I'm broke, got no money.
Right.
So we did an asset search, and sure enough, they had a couple bank accounts, no.
So take us through the asset search. What did you do?
So we start usually simultaneously with the top 4 asset classes: real estate, vehicles, bank accounts, and corporate assets.
Okay.
And we have people working on those simultaneously, because sometimes you'll find hidden assets in another class within one of the other areas. For example, sometimes if somebody has a hidden bank account that's maybe not in their name, they put in somebody else's name. If you find real estate, you will find that maybe the tax bill for that real estate is being paid by this other bank account, right? So you can cross-reference. So this person had very little, had a thin asset inventory, but we still went through everything. We went through every last bank statement, and they had money coming in, money going out, but not a huge amount. We found a debit card charge on their bank account for $35.00.
Okay.
We check every single one out. Doesn't seem like a lot. They're not hiding millions. It was for, Poppy's Depot. What is that? We look it up, get the phone number. It's a little store. Looks like it's near a boat ramp, marina. Okay, what is Poppy's? Well, we check out Poppy's. Sure enough, it's a little snack bar, parts store in this marina.
Okay.
We're going to follow it up. Check out Poppy's. What's his invoice for it? And it was weird because it's $35 even, no tax, no uneven amount. Make a long story short, on that date for that amount, we were able to get the receipt from that boat depot for what it was for. It was for a bolt, one bolt, $35. Well, what kind of bolt costs $35? BOLT, bolt, not a boat, a bolt.
Yeah.
And this was the guy behind the parts counter, old grizzled guy with a hat. He goes, yeah, it's a Clevis bolt. Well, what's a Clevis bolt? He pulled one out. It's a bolt. It's about a foot long with a slot in it. He goes, this is for either a sailboat or a big yacht. Well, now we're on to something. And he was able to match it up because they've marked down what slip it went to. And there's a yacht, 150-foot yacht, and this slip that this guy bought a bolt for. Well, maybe he bought it for his friend or something. But now we have a yacht. We start doing some background on the yacht. We found out it was bought in the Bahamas. We got the closing statement from the Bahamas Boat Company. The money that bought it was wired in from a bank account in Colorado.
Wow.
This case was in Florida. Well, that bank account in Colorado was connected to an attorney who represented the debtor, or an accountant. I'm not saying not an attorney, an accountant that represented the debtor. So now we had a connection to this yacht to the debtor. And we did a little more research and found, sure enough, it was his yacht. We did some surveillance. He was on it and had some payments to utilities and some food service for the yacht. Make a long story short, the the creditor, their attorney, went to this debtor and said, look, we know it's your yacht. If you want, we can go through the full trouble of documenting it, bring it to court, because you signed an affidavit in court saying you have no assets, right?
Right.
If you want us to go back and prove you do, that's going to be more trouble for you, and we'll repossess and sell the boat. Otherwise, you can settle. And because of that, they were able to settle and make good on their debt.
That's like a movie, you know.
And a lot of them are. I mean,
that's
they're
like a
not all
movie.
that sexy, right? Some of them are small payments that turn into something big. We had another divorce case where the guy had a $15 payment to a jewelry store. Well, he's not buying jewelry, but we traced that back, and it was a repair deductible for a $50,000 Rolex that was registered in his name. So a lot of times these small expenses or small records turn into something big.
So tip to everybody: don't pay flat rates. Always,
make it an uneven amount. I mean,
put some change in there, like 1537. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, no, that's really that's interesting stuff, and that's very. You can tell. First of all, you can tell you're very passionate about what you do. Like you're definitely going to get and find what's there, and you have to be very detail oriented and very like specific. How many? Do you have a lot of people working there?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple dozen people that work on different cases for us in different areas. Some of them are experts in the digital side and extracting hidden records from everything from routers. Another tip for your listeners and viewers, whether it's the good news or bad news, don't assume that all your electronic devices are benign. Even things like vehicles. Your vehicle, if it's newer than 2015 or 16, is tracking every time you open and close the door, when you beep the horn, what gear it's in. So if there's a case where you're stating I was at home, I wasn't there, even if you don't have GPS, it'll show that your vehicle is traveling 30 miles an hour. We had a divorce case where one of the parties was saying, I went by myself to the movies, and both doors were shown to have opened up at the movies, right? So there were two people in the car.
Interesting.
When you sit on the passenger seat, there's a sensor that tracks to see if the airbag should go off if there's an accident for weight. So if there's somebody in your seat, your car knows about it.
Wow. Okay. So like, what are the most common reasons that your clients are doing the asset searches, would you say?
Most of them are judgments that they have against another person, or even pre-litigation, to see what they're up against. And we tell clients all the time, you want to make sure that your client has, or your potential counterparty has assets, but also not too many assets. If you're suing somebody for $10,000 and they have 10 million, you might not want to sue them because they have money to throw on against you. So you want to make sure that pre-litigation that they have some assets that are worth getting, but not too much, so you're not fighting David against Goliath.
Wow. Okay. So where do people mostly try to hide their assets? Like you hear about like offshore, like all that. Like people like to say that. I don't know if a lot of people know what that means, but
No, and that's actually a good thing to know about, because most people that hide assets, an embezzler, a Ponzi schemer, a divorce party that's trying to squirrel away a couple $100,000 extra for themselves, or even a probate fraud case. Most of these people are what we call amateur asset hiders. They don't do this for a living, right?
Okay.
What they think they're doing is actually creates more records than they're hiding. If they quit claim a deed to a house to their cousin, that actually creates more records. If they put their vehicle in somebody else's name, if they hide a bank account, they're actually creating more records to find than if they just laid low.
Right.
And you got to remember, the asset hiding that's the most advanced are very high, advanced narcotics traffickers or international terrorists. They're hiding tens of millions of dollars, and they have the skills to do that because they do it every day. But you remember, even those are discovered. The federal government finds those assets eventually. So if those advanced asset concealers can be detected, Joe Schmo trying to hide $50,000 from a spouse in a divorce has no chance. Okay. So most people try to hide it by doing exactly that, putting in somebody else's name. One of the most common ways people, well, I shouldn't say common, but a sneaky way people do it is overpaying their taxes. So at the end of the year, they'll actually pay an extra 10, 20, 50,000 to the IRS for their tax bill, even if they don't owe it.
Oh, interesting.
That money now is a credit that they can pull back later. It doesn't show up in any bank account. It doesn't show up in any real estate search. So you have to make sure you're looking at that too, to make sure there's not any overpayments that can later be withdrawn.
Wow. Okay. What would you say are like the biggest risks that
Mm.
business owners deal with?
Well, that's smart to tell them because business owners are very vulnerable to embezzlement, and I have to tell you, it's heartbreaking when we see it. Every time that we find money stolen from a business, when we tell that business owner, the CFO, whoever it is, look, we found it. Here's the documentation. Here's the person. Here's how much they stole. They don't believe it. They say that person would have never done it. No, you have to be wrong. It wasn't Sally, the accountant. It wasn't, Bobby, the salesman. They swear up and down that we're wrong because it's always the last person they'd expect, a trusted employee, longtime employee, somebody that if they asked them for the money, they would have given it to them, shirt off their back. So always double check. It doesn't matter who it is. You want to have good double checks. Most companies, best practice, make your accountant, your bookkeeper go on vacation for a week every year so somebody else can do their job. Have cross training so somebody else is doing it. You don't want to have your accountant, even your CFO, open the mail because that's one of the places where records can be detected. The owner should open the mail, or maybe a secretary open the mail, so that who's stealing the money doesn't have control over the bank statements.
Yeah.
And it could be a deal breaker. I mean, a small company that loses a couple $100,000 through embezzlement, that could be all their net profit for a year. That could be an extra employee or two that could help them grow. And it's you want to not you want to trust people, but don't give them the opportunity. We have what's called the fraud triangle. Somebody who commits fraud, embezzlement, will have three things happen in their life that will make them steal from their employer. One is they see the opportunity to steal the money. Sometimes it's accidental. We had a case where a controller went to the gas station to put gas in their car, accidentally used their corporate card, not their personal card, total accident, and then realized later they were scared to death. They thought their boss was going to fire them. Turned out later, nobody noticed. So they realized, I can steal and nobody will tell.
Wow.
The next thing is they have to have a need for the money, a financial setback, a medical event, healthcare problem, or just greed that they want money for some habit. But those two things by themselves won't be enough for somebody to steal from your company. They have to have the third leg of the triangle, which is the justification. Some reason to justify the theft. Oh, I was passed over for promotion. My boss was mean to me. This person has a better office than me. Once you have all three, now you can be stolen from, and it can be anybody.
Wow. And those are ways to prove that, right?
That's right.
I think one thing, well, I mean, everything is like really, I feel is like so on point. And one thing that I like, thinking about my own work is cross training people, not to have like one person working on the books, and also having your finance person, take a break for a week so somebody else could do the job.
Yep.
But cross training is huge too. Like you want to be able, if you entrust every one person to do one role, you're really setting yourself up there, especially if they leave the job and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it makes you vulnerable, and really you're helping that person out, because if you put somebody in a position where they're able to steal, sometimes the difference between them being a good person or a bad person is what you allow them to do. If they know that two other people are cross-trained and occasionally do their job, they're not going to steal because they know they'll get caught. If you put them in a place where you're leaving the cookie jar wide open, you might take a good person or a person that can go either way and make them into a bad person. Whereas if they know that they're being monitored, you're not being rude, you're not mistrusting them, you're just saying, look, this is best practice. Like you said, cross training, take a break. Now you're making sure that they stay on the true path and they remain a good person.
Right. That's interesting. So tell us more about the mediation that you do. I think that's really interesting. I mean, that's obviously, lawyer stories want to hear more about mediation and that sort of thing. So, when should it be considered in one of your disputes and litigation?
Yeah, this is an area where we get a lot of very good feedback from attorneys. And most attorneys love to be able to settle a case or mediate a case, but their biggest pushback is the client is just clinging to, they want their day in court. They want to say their piece. They want to put their word out there. And it's hard to tell a client that it's a good thing to avoid that, because as you know, once you're in court, you're not in control of your destiny anymore. Up until that day you walk into court, you can control as a client what you settle for, what you agree to. Once you go to court, you're putting it on the table, and now you're whatever the court says you have to do. Also, most clients don't understand the risk that they have by litigating. You have the cost of your fees.
Yeah.
Some contracts you have to pay the other person's fees, and that risk is big. The other advantage to mediation, it's all private. You go to court, you start presenting evidence and back and forth. That's all on the record, and anybody can use it, maybe even 10 years later. Mediation, you can exchange and show your cards and tell the other person what you're trying to do. It's all kept in the confines of that mediation. And the mediator doesn't pick sides. The mediator doesn't say, here's what you have to do. We will tell you what the realities are, what's going to show up in court, what other cases may be like, what the common ground is. Most cases already have 80% agreements on the terms. It's just that other 10 or 20% that needs to be agreed to. So we can put that 80% on the table, show the parties that they're already 90% of the way there, and just whittle away at that last piece and tell them, look, it's all confidential. You can avoid the cost of trial. You can avoid the risk that you might lose it all. And I can tell you, anybody that I've known that's gone through an entire full-blown litigation to trial, even when they've won, wish that they could have avoided it.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. That's mediation is definitely like a better form of conciliation. If you can get it done that way.
The hardest part is getting people to show up. If you can get somebody to agree to do it, and it's hard to do, and that's why we reach out to attorneys to try to ask them, please beg them, just show up. You could just sit there grumpy, arms folded. You don't have to say anything, do anything. Just show up. Let the mediator do their work. Let them show you what the benefits are. You don't have to agree to anything. You're not going to be forced into anything. You're not going to be compelled. Just sit there, put a scowl on your face, be miserable, and just let the mediator do their work, and at least get them in the door and let us go to bat for you.
Right. So tell us about like all your websites. I have like 4 websites for you. Can I say them?
Yeah.
We have activeintel.com, riskcoverage.com, telemediator.com, and actualhuman.com. So I'm curious, like what role do you have all 4 of these, maybe 5?
Yeah, so that the Active Intel is our website for the private investigative agency that talks about all those different asset searches, fraud investigations. Telemediator is the website for our mediation division. And one thing about our mediation business is it's all done, when available, remote. So you don't have to show up anywhere. You don't have to be in the same room and face that person face to face. It can be done remotely. The mediator can keep more distance between the conflicting parties. Risk Coverage is the website for our commercial lines insurance producer. We're a licensed cyber insurance agency. So we do
what does that
cyber.
mean?
What's that?
What does that mean? Like licensed insurance?
So the insurance industry is going through a big change where you, as an attorney, you have a law office. You have insurance, I'm sure, in that office. You have, maybe fire insurance, theft, those kind of things. And commercial insurance covers those potential losses. But one of the areas most insurance policies, most business policies, called a BOP, business owner's policy, or a CPP, commercial package policy, does not cover is cyber loss. If you have a ransomware attack, a cyber attack, those are usually exclusions of coverage on your standard commercial policy. And those are much more likely than your building burning down. They're much more risky. As an example, I'll ask attorneys or business owners listening to this, if you pulled into your business on a Monday morning, God forbid, and you see your whole building is burned to the ground, ashes, nobody gets hurt, but it's burned to the ground. How fast could you be back in business? Well, you could go to Walmart, buy some folding tables, a couple laptops, log into your network, probably be back in business in a day or 2, right? It wouldn't be easy. It'd be tough. You might have to rent some office space, but you could be back in business. If you pulled into your parking lot on Monday morning, your business looks fine, everything's good. You walk in the door, you log in, and all your computers are dead, locked up. You have no access to your clients, no access to your accounts receivable, no access to your transaction history, emails, even your phones are probably connected to the computer. How fast can you be back in business now, right? If ever. So cyber insurance protects from that risk, which is much more likely than your building burning down. There's cyber attackers out there every day pinging away at all these computers are getting cyber attacked every day. All your computers are.
Wow.
Cyber insurance protects against a loss. If you have a loss, it'll cover that. But also the cyber policies, the insurance companies don't want to have a loss. So what they do is they also ping your system every day to see if there's any attacks happening. And if there are, prevents them. It's kind of like if you had fire insurance, having a fireman standing in front of your building, ready to put out the fire. Cyber insurance companies now, and whether, that's our company, but you can get that anywhere. You can ask your insurance agent about cyber insurance. We're not, trying to sell to your viewers because we only cover a couple states. But it's very important to look at that risk, because the risk that you have as a business owner are much higher on the cyber side than on the physical damage. Your building's not going to burn, right?
Wow. Okay.
Here's the last one, actual human. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
This day and age, as you know, it's very tough to get somebody on the phone. If you want to call up somebody to get some information about a product or service, you're going to reach one of three things when you call up.
So true. So true.
Right? How you get anybody on the phone? You either get voicemail. If you go online, you get a chat bot. You can tell it's a robot. They're not even answering the questions, right?
Right.
Or you'll get a receptionist that maybe answers the phone, but they don't really know anything, right?
Yep.
Option number three, if you call a company, you might get an actual person that talks to you, but they're a salesperson. They're just trying to sell you stuff. They're not going to give you unbiased information. They're just going to try to sell you. It's frustrating. We deal with it all the time. Try to call a contractor, an electrician, a plumber, any professional, skilled profession, can't get them on the phone. Actual human gives you a fourth option. You can book a live one-on-one consultation with people in various professions. Private investigator, mediator, general contractor, insurance, accountant. You got to pay for it, right? But it's pretty cheap. Usually I think it's less than $100. But at least you can reach somebody, ask them direct questions, one-on-one, grab them by the lapels, undivided attention. You can probably get the same information if you watch YouTube videos, but you can't ask YouTube a question.
Right.
Right? You can't ask YouTube about your scenario. This is a way that gives you another option. It's not for everybody, and some people might be offended by, I don't want to pay to talk to somebody. That's fine. I get it. YouTube is still there. Websites are still there. This is an option for people that are just frustrated. I can't get a hold of somebody. I want to talk to an actual person, one-on-one, undivided attention, somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Right. Wow. It's amazing. You have a lot going on. Like you do a lot of cool stuff. I mean, you really do. This is great. So I know we kind of touched on this, but I want to go back because I think this is important. Like, what are some of the biggest issues like you're seeing people and companies dealing with that they can come to you for?
In those areas, what we would love to do is to be able to be more preventative, right? When we get a call from a company that has an embezzlement issue and it costs a lot of money to track the person down and get the money back, we would rather be involved earlier, where it's only going to cost a few $100 to advise on prevention. The issues are usually after the fact. Same thing with fraud, with consumers losing money on fraud. Those are a very common scenario. With we have another area that deals with people that have problems with documents, real estate documents, lien documents, vehicle documents. And it's usually because you're having to deal with a public sector entity. Anytime you have to deal with like the DMV or clerk of court, recorder, it's not that they're bad people. It's just that the public sector is different than the private sector. Look, in the private sector, think about it. If you walk into Best Buy or the cell phone store, they're going to be falling all over themselves to try to help you because they want to sell something, right? You walk into the DMV, what could they care if you?
Yeah, why is that though? Like, what is that?
Because it's a profit motive, right? At the Best Buy, they want to sell another TV because it's to their benefit. They're in business to make a profit. The government agencies are in business to not really do anything. I'm not saying they're lazy, it's just that they don't have a motive to sell more TVs or sell more titles, record more deeds. There's no incentive. And their people are great people. They're very smart. They know the insides and out, but it's a different corporate culture. Like as an attorney, you want to do more cases. I want to get out there and be ambitious in marketing.
Yeah.
The government's not trying to market to do more driver's licenses, right? They're not trying to market to do more
Yeah.
cases,
Okay.
right? So it's a different mentality, and the frustration comes from the fact that when you walk into the DMV or you walk into Best Buy, you're thinking it's the same thing. There's people that are trying to help you, but they don't have the incentive to try to sell another TV or to try to do another driver's license.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay. So moving on, just a
Yep.
couple more questions here. Like, give us some advice for staying protected, like businesses. How can we stay protected?
As a medium or small business owner, the best three things you can do is, number one, like you said, cross train people and give people time away from crucial things, even if it's sales or marketing or production or manufacturing, especially finances. Give the key people some time away so somebody else can look at it. It's tricky because you want to make sure the person doesn't feel like you're going behind their back, or you don't trust them, or you're
Right.
trying to replace them. But you want to have somebody else, another pair of eyes looking at it, especially finances. Number two is be very aware of the cyber risk. Your chances as a small business of your building burning down are infinitesimally smaller than the chances of walking in one day and a ransomware person has locked up all your system and you have no access to customers. And if your customers are calling you or emailing you or trying to order online and they can't reach you, they're going to go to a competitor. You may never get them back. Cyber risk is huge. And whether you buy insurance for it or have cyber protection, that's huge. And number three is look at whatever professional resources you have outside of your normal routine. If you have a sales staff and you have outside contractors you use, think about what's out there. There's so much technology out there that can help you as a business avoid losses. And, a loss is 10 times worse than the dollars of gain. If you sell something for $100, or if you lose $100 in loss, the $100 in loss is worth more, because here's why. It will take you probably 5 sales of $100 to make up that loss, because most businesses work on a 15 or 20% margin. So when you sell something for 100, you only keep 20.
Right.
So if you lose $100 in a loss, you have to sell 5 things at 100 to equal that loss.
Wow. Great advice. Great advice. Anything interesting you're currently working on that you want to share?
Yeah, our one of our biggest projects now is on the asset search side. We're starting to mix in some more of artificial intelligence, some of the buzzwords, AI and GPT and all that stuff, not to do the work, but to help be able to ingest more records. So a typical case, if it takes us 2 or 3 hours to ingest 2,000 records, we're trying to use automation to maybe ingest 10,000 in that same period of time. We still have to analyze it manually, and humans have to abstract it, but using the technology leveraged and controlled by people to do more with the same amount of resources, we're writing some programs to be able to do that.
So what do you think about AI so far?
It's quite frankly, people can have different opinions. It's going to be big. It's going to be big. It's still in the early stages.
Are there a lot of fraud concerns? Like, what about,
I think about there's going to be fraud, just like there was with the internet. When the internet came out, there was fraud. You have to be careful of it, but it's a game changer. Right now, it's in its infancy. It's not really ready for prime time. It's not what we call retail ready, but there are certain things you can use that will make any business be able to be more productive on any part of it. Sales, marketing. Just don't try to use it for something that it's not ready to do yet. But a lot of very basic and tedious and repetitive work can be done. And you don't want to use it to replace an employee. What you want to use it for is to get more efficiency and make the employee's job easier. If you have 5 employees and you can find ways to use AI, keep the 5 employees, but just get 20 employees worth of work from them and make their job easier at the same time. It's only fair to them because they've been with you for that period of time.
What kind of stuff do you see it doing right now? Like you said, it's not retail ready, but is it like writing reports and stuff like that? Is that sort of...
No, we don't like to have it be customer facing at all. No writing of reports, nothing that the client sees. We're using it to ingest and to sort through incoming information, raw information, that then we can do the manual side too. We don't want to have it be anywhere on the last...
So how does that work? Like you get info and it just sort of...
Well, we're also using it to gather the info,
Okay.
to gather it and to sort it into different silos, where if it's data, if it's PDF files, if it's images, to put it, and some of them can actually read words. Like if I had a picture, if somebody painted a picture with a paintbrush and they wrote the word, Benny Gold on a painting, it can read that and know that it's those words. It knows what color it is, and even know if the person was left or right-handed. So it can ingest information and let us
Gotcha.
then do
Okay.
more work with it.
Gotcha. So, David, anything else that we left out today that you
No,
want?
thank you. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. A lot of times we have conversations that it's more one-dimensional. This was very insightful. I had a great time talking about those subjects. Hopefully it was interesting to those who watch and listen.
There's so much. I feel like you have I feel like you must work like 16 hours a day. Oh, and I only say this, or maybe 18. I only say this because like there's so much to what you do. It feels like you're trying to protect these companies and look at the risk and manage the risk. I mean, there's just so much to it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that word risk comes up a lot. Risk coverage on the insurance side, on the cyber side, and even on the mediation side. We want to help people avoid whatever pitfalls and risks that exist. And there's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of easy ways to do it, and that creates more. Yeah, happiness is a little bit of a touchy-feely word, but keeping people out of the soup is a good way to kind of improve life and not have a lot of downside for the client.
Yeah, well, that was awesome. I really appreciate all this information, and I really hope we can work together. We have Lawyer Stories Connect coming out in a couple months, and like I would, we'd like to have you as a preferred partner. So if people run into these issues, they can come to you and your company. So we'll talk more about that over email.
Yeah.
But if there's anything else that you'd like to say, if not,
no, thanks so much. It was great to have the conversation. Very enjoyable.
Awesome. So stay right there. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. And wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves.
Thanks for that.